Hi everyone, it's Keely here for Soy and Shea, and thank you so much for joining me for today's video. We are now officially in autumn here in Australia, and although we are still getting really hot, humid days, the mornings are actually starting to show signs of what is going to be coming for late autumn and the rest of winter. And I decided that it was about time that I took out some of those sort of softer florals that I like to do for summer in the Bath and Body range and introduce some warmer, more comforting smells for autumn and winter. So today I'm going to take you along as I make a moisturizer, and I'm going to be using orange patchouli from off of Nurture soap. This is the same fragrance that I used in the camel milk soap, and I absolutely love it, and I think it is going to be so nice for these cooler months. If you're not a fan of patchouli, give it a chance, because the orange that goes in with this, it really tones down that patchouli smell, and it is absolutely beautiful. Now if you are interested in getting your hands on a basic cream or moisturizer recipe, this is what I am sharing over on the Create with Soy and Shea Patreon page. Now the way it works is every month I bring out a new recipe for anyone that is on the $5 and above levels, and what happens is it stays on the $5 level for 3 months, so it will be there for March, April and May, and then for 3 months after that it will stay on the $10 level, and then after that time the recipes move up into the vault. So if you are watching this video much later than March, just consider you may need to join up at a higher level to get your hands on this recipe. Now you might notice that the recipe is a little bit different to the one I'm actually creating today, but it is a tried and tested recipe. It is actually very close to the very first recipe I ever created to create moisturizers with, and over the years that I've been making it, I have actually added to the recipe to create something with a little bit more label appeal and a little bit more goodness in it. If you are on the $10 level over at Patreon, there are heaps of tips and tricks on how to actually customize basic recipes to make them something suitable for your own business. So I will leave links down below if you do want to come and join us over on the Patreon page, but for now what we'll do is we'll go and jump into making our moisturizer. Let's go. So we are all ready to go. I have got my big stock pot. It has already been sterilized. I'll leave a link to a video showing how I actually do sterilize my equipment. I've got on my stovetop here my little bain-marie system going. It is just simply a saucepan which is about 1/3 to 1/4 filled with water, which I'm bringing up to boil. I prefer to use a bain-marie system because I don't overheat my oils and butters by putting it onto direct heat or into the microwave. So I just find it a much safer way of doing it, a little bit slower, but you know you're not going to ruin any of your batches here. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my phase A into my big stock pot, which is my water and my humectant. I'm going to start with the humectant first. I am using some aloe vera gel, and this will help to keep moisture into the skin once it is applied. So we'll measure that one out. Okay, so the next part I am putting in is my water, and I'm using some distilled water here. Now whenever I measure out my water, I always add in a little bit extra because I have done this so many times. I know exactly how much water I lose from out of the whole boiling and evaporation process, so I now add that directly into my pan. If you do not know how much you lose, or you lose different amounts each time, best thing is once you've got everything weighed out into your pot, weigh it to see how much it all weighs. Have another pot of distilled water on the side coming up to temperature. Once this has come up to temperature, re-weigh the pot and then add in whatever water you are missing. But what I'm going to do to try and eliminate some of that water loss, I have one of these green silicone cling things. I'm going to pop it over my pot. This is a brand new one, so it's super sticky. So I'm going to pop it over the pot like so, and then just to make sure that it really does stay down, because water and this stuff really does not go very well together, I am also going to put a elastic strap around it just to make sure that it does hold down, and then I am going to pop the lid on top as well, and we'll get that into our water and we'll start getting that up to temperature. The next phase we're going to do is phase B, and this is all about our emulsifier and our oils. So first in the pot is our emulsifier. This is needed to bring those oils and water together, as oils and water do not naturally mix and stay emulsified. I like to use a vegetable-based emulsifier for this particular lotion, but there are lots of different emulsifiers on the market. If you are trying this recipe and you're using a different one to what I suggest, then you need to do a test batch to make sure that it's going to work. The next thing I'm going to add in is my oils. Now I really like my olive oil in here, and I am using extra virgin olive oil to make sure I get all of those skin benefits out of this one. In the recipe that I provide, I recommend using some sweet almond oil. Okay, so I've got all of my liquid oils into the pot, and I'm now going to add a little bit of butter as well, a vegetable butter. And I like to add a butter into my moisturizers because it does add to the viscosity and the sort of feel of the actual moisturizer. I don't tend to add butters into my lotions because lotions you tend to want to be a little bit thinner, but being a moisturizer or a cream, we want this to be nice and thick. And finally, to make sure that these oils are nice and safe from oxidization, I'm going to add in a nice amount of some natural vitamin E. Now when I make lotions and creams, I like to use the heat and hold method. There's theories on whether it really does or doesn't work. I find that it does actually personally work for me. So what I'm going to do is wait until my water, or phase A, comes up to temperature. And once it's up to temperature, I then put my phase B into the other bain-marie pot, and in the 20 minutes that I'm holding that water, the rest of my phase B will actually melt down. Okay, so this has finished its little timer, and what I'm going to do is take my pots out of my water here. I'm going to wipe around the base of here so we don't end up with any contaminant water in either our oil or our water phase. Let's get that cleaned off, and then onto a heat safe mat there. Let's grab the other one out too. Give that a good wipe because we're going to actually be tipping this one into the other one, and I definitely don't want any water dribble. This was a clean cloth I'm using here too. Alright, so just wiped that one off. Let me grab another little silicone mat to sit that one on there. Alright, so to get the oil and water phase combined, we need them to be sitting between 80 and 85 degrees. I am sitting at about 88 degrees Celsius. I'm happy with that. It's not too much higher than the 85, and sometimes our thermometers do have a slight variance on them. So what I'm now going to do is take my lid off my water, and then I'm going to pour my oil phase into my water phase. Just give that a knock down to get as much of that condensation back in so we don't lose it. Peel the top off. So this is the bit I always enjoy doing the most, and that is mixing my oil and my water together and watching it turn into that really nice milky white colour. Scrape out the rest of my pan. Make sure we've got every little bit of oil and emulsifying wax, vitamin E from out of here. And then to make sure that the oils and the water emulsify, you do need to use a stick blender. So I've got mine here. I'm going to give this a bit of a mix for probably for about a minute, minute and a half. Alright, so that has had a really good mix. What I'm going to do is leave my stick blender there. I'm going to let this sit and rest for about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and give it another mix just to make sure that it is well and truly emulsified and not going to split on me. So again, I'm going to put my cover over because this is still hot. It is still releasing steam, so we want it to make sure that we don't lose any water out of here. Alright, so I have just given that one other mix there just to make sure it is fully emulsified. Now what I'm going to do is leave this one sit here to cool down and come down to about 30 to 40 degrees before we add in our Phase C, which is all about the preservative and the fragrance. Now because of the size that my batch is, I will probably come back in about another 10-15 minutes and give it another mix. The bigger the batch you do, the more often you have to come back and give it a mix just to make sure that it's not separating out. But if you're making a small batch, say 100 or 200 grams, giving it that 1 or 2 mixes is usually plenty. So we'll be back in just a moment to add in our preservative and fragrance. Okay, so our preservative has been sitting here cooling. I have given it quite a number of stirs throughout its cool down process just to make sure that it is nicely combined and stable with its emulsion there, and it is looking beautiful. Next thing I am going to do is add in some preservative because this is a water-based product, so you need a water soluble preservative to go in here. So let's pour some of this in. Alright, so let's give this a good stir and get that all combined in there. Now when you are using your preservative in your cool down phase, it does depend upon which preservative you are using to what sort of temperature you would add it in at, because they are all very heat sensitive. So most of them you do actually add in between 30 and 40 degrees, but some of them can be added in at slightly higher temperatures. You need it to be added in while it is at least above 30 degrees so that you activate the preservative. If it's too cold, you don't activate all the sort of good parts of the preservative, so it can't actually do its job. And if you add it too high on some preservatives, you actually kill off the preservative and then it doesn't do its job properly either. So you need to be reading these sort of instructions that come with your preservative to find out what the optimum temperature is or temperature range is to add in your preservative. So I'm going to give that a really good mix until I see that it is nice and smooth. Now if you have watched any of my Bath & Body product videos before, you'll know that I don't like potting up my ingredients until they have cooled down, and that is just to stop any condensation building up in the containers that I'm going to put them in. So once I have all this mixed in, I am going to pop the lid back on and I'm going to leave this one to sit overnight, and then we'll be back very shortly and we will pot it up. And just before potting it up, I will put my fragrance in here. Okay, so we are back the next day. This has cooled down and I am happy that I can now start potting it up without creating any issues in my jars. So let's get that all undone. It is looking beautiful in here, nice and thick and creamy, but it is actually still nice and light on the skin as well. Now when I actually made this, I have made it a little bit bigger than what I need for the 10 jars that I'm going to be filling up, because I also need to make some samples for the market, need to make some unscented samples. So if I was only doing the one fragrance, I would have actually put the fragrance oil in at the cool down phase, but because, as I said, I'm doing samples, I'm going to add my fragrance in now. So what I'm going to do is take out of this pot what I need for my scented containers here. So let's start by pouring most of that out. Alright, so I have got out of the pot what I need to actually fill up 10 of my containers and do a couple of little scented samples to send out with orders. What's left in my pot here, this is going to become the unscented samples that I hand out at the markets. What I am going to do is just pour my fragrance that I'm using. I've got some orange patchouli from Nurture Soap, which I'm pretty sure I said earlier in the video, but it is the next day, so just in case. So I'm going to pour that in there. Give it a squeeze and get the last little bit out. I have actually got a big 1 pound bottle of this on its way. It's so nice. I've got just enough in here to do this particular batch. Let's get that one out the way, give it a good stir just to make sure that is all combined in there. Be interesting to see if this turns this yellow like it does in the soap. Alright, so I've got all that stirred in. I'm going to use this piping bag. I actually went to use it for soaping one day and cut my tip off too big, so I saved it. We might just fold that over, clip it closed so it doesn't come off, and then pop it into my bucket. And we're going to pour some of this moisturiser in here. It just makes it so much easier to get into the jars with a lot less mess. Okay, so I'm going to fill up these little jars. I've got 10 of them. So I'm just going to pop them on the scale. I always weigh out how much product I'm putting into a jar just for labeling purposes. I don't just assume that because it's a 100ml jar that I'm going to have 100ml of product in there, because everything has different densities. So to make sure that I am putting in the correct amount, I always weigh every single one of these. Okay, so the way I am now labeling my pots up, if you've ever seen any of my videos before, I've always put like a shrink band around the top of my containers. Now those shrink bands I used to get in from Aussie soap supplies, and last year once they had the fire I actually ran out of those shrink bands and I had to look for alternatives, and I decided in the interest of trying to keep my plastic use down where I didn't need to use it, I was going to change the way I was doing them. And I've got these little security tabs. I think you can just see them shining on this screen. So now what I do is I actually put just a couple of security tabs on either side of the jar. Then I get my label, which I have printed up with my label printer. We're going to get the backing off there, and we are going to line this up. So do it as I showed in the magnesium oil video, which I'll leave a link to. I'm lining it up so that the bottom of the jar and the bottom of the label look straight, laying it down and then pulling it around my jar like so. And then that means when people go to take the lid off at markets, it's actually a lot harder to take off, but once you get these home you can actually just take those security tabs off so that they are no longer in the way. So I really like this new way of packaging them up. If you are interested in doing something similar, just look up security seals on Google and they will come up for you. So let's get this one done, and then I'll show you my little sample bags. Okay, so now that we've got all of the pots all labelled up and done, let's get these sample sachets done as well. So these little sample sachets are in Mylar bags, and if you are interested in them, simply jump onto eBay or Amazon and you'll be able to find them. They come in all sorts of different sizes and colours as well. Generally 3 sides of them are sealed. You've got this end which opens up so you can put your product in. Once you've sealed it with the heat sealer at this end, you've got the little tear tabs that customers can then peel them open to get at the product on the inside. I absolutely love doing all of my samples in these, and all I'm going to do is pop a label on the front so people know exactly what they are getting, what ingredients are in it as well. So these scented ones are actually going to go out in orders that get placed online. I'm going to be filling some more of those up with the unscented moisturizer, which is what is going to markets. Now it did look like I was having difficulty actually filling these up, and yes I was, and that is simply because the piping bag that I was using, as I said before I started piping, I'd actually cut the end of that bag too big for the piping tip I was using, and was actually also too big for filling these up. When I do use the piping bag to fill these up with, I usually have a much smaller opening on them so that it's not nearly as messy or as difficult difficult to actually fill them. So if you are filling your Mylar bags, make sure that you're doing it with either a piping bag with a really narrow opening on it, or you can even get some of those really big syringes without the needles on, and that will really help to fill these little sachets up as well. These generally have between 5 and 10 grams worth of product in them. The ones I'm going to be taking to market, I will probably actually be a little bit more careful with how much I'm weighing into them, probably more around that 5 gram mark. Just because it's going to get very expensive with our new rulings. We now have to actually have pre-packaged samples to hand out, and they must actually be handed out by the stall holder. They can't be self-serve anymore. So we are working on topping up all of our samples for markets. But there we go, that is my brand new moisturizer scent Orange Patchouli, all done up with our little samples to go out in any online orders. I hope you've enjoyed watching how I made my moisturizer today. Don't forget you can get the basic cream recipe over on the Patreon page for the next couple of months. And until the next video comes out, I hope you have a great one. I'll see you then. Bye.